harm my ability to gain rental income. Knowing that, you might say, okay, well, why don't I offer you a hypoallergenic dog? Okay, that's one possibility. Another one could be, I don't want the dog urinating in the apartment. So you could say, I'll tell you what, I will buy a dog or get a dog that's at least 5 years old and is potty trained. But you'll never be able to craft those creative solutions if you don't know what the hopes, concerns, interests, desires underlying people's positions are. Another strategy is to identify multiple issues and your priorities on them and ask the other party for what they care about. Now, the key is sometimes people will give information and sometimes they won't. People get very nervous sometimes in negotiation, particularly if they're not skilled, and they may think, oh, I can't give this information away because it might harm me. Whereas if you just find out their interests and what they care about, that doesn't harm them. So you can ask them questions about what they care about and their priorities. If they won't share them with you, you can in turn just start to share information with around yours. And ideally that will bridge the gap by building trust, and they will reciprocate. Ideally, you will identify a number of solutions, which the reading The Behavior of Successful Negotiators basically stated that outstanding negotiators do. They create a number of different alternatives. And as I already said, by sharing information. Okay, we're almost done here. Strategy for Texoil. So you wanted to take a cooperative approach, but without revealing your BATNA most of the time. The only reason you'd really reveal your BATNA is if you're at a very dead end and you need to just figure out exactly what the person's best alternative is so you can craft something slightly better. You want to build trust. You want to share information about interests and priorities, but not your bottom line. If somebody says, well, what's your bottom line? And you tell them, they're only going to offer you something a little bit better than that. And ask for information about interests and priorities. Now remember, I said in any negotiation, even if you can make the pie bigger, you still have to claim value in that. So for claiming value, as with what we discussed, you want to figure out what your BATNA is and ideally develop it. So again, if you're going into a compensation negotiation, ideally you would have already interviewed with a number of other places and had a number of different enticing alternatives. Determine what your walkaway point is so you don't ultimately experience agreement bias. Define what your aspiration is, your target. Be aggressive but realistic. Open aggressively. Make concessions reciprocally, not unilaterally. Remember, they should be offering concessions as well. Use the concession size to indicate you're reaching your bottom line, and consider what's called a post-settlement settlement. Sometimes with Texoil, people come to agreements like, say, $500,000 for the station, which suggests that the station owners really don't meet all their underlying interests, because with $500,000, they can't go on the trip, but it's better, or the full 2-year trip. So they say, okay, well, I'll just go on it for a year. So what I say when they come to me is, okay, that's a viable agreement. That would have been a viable deal. Now I want you to see if you can do better. See if you can bring in more value that doesn't make one person better or worse off when the other party does better. So I basically say, listen, Texoil has done well and met its needs, but the station owners haven't. So see if you can get more value out so the station owners can go on both years of their interested around the world trip. So you have a settlement. It's a deal, but you try and do better by extracting more value. So you agree to something and then push it. Okay, we only have a few other things. What do you do to prepare for creating value? One is you try and perspective take. It's not about empathy, just cognitively understanding the world. Empathy is about, I understand your emotions. You want to try and put yourself in their shoes. Define your BATNA. Analyze your own and others' interests, the other's interests. And here's the biggie. Search for differences. Even though great negotiators do try and make statements that find common ground, they're also very good for figuring out where there are differences, because it's those differences in priorities that allows for the log rolling to occur. So as an example that I told you, one person wants a large office rather than a nice view. The other wants a view more than the extra space. So it's the relative importance of the issues. If they're different, it's a gem of an opportunity. Expectations for the future. Are there differences? So for example, a brother and a sister inherit a tool store, and the sister expects there to be a steady decline in profits. The brother expects there to be solid growth. So those differences in expectations allow the brother to buy the sister out of the business at the net present value of the meager growth expectations that she has, and then the brother excitedly can move forward with the solid growth he expects. Risk preferences. If one is more risk averse than other, say the risk averse author gets the advance and the risk seeker gets the profits and royalties once the book is actually sold. Another few examples of searching for differences. Time orientation. Some people have a longer time horizon than others for various reasons. So two partners in a joint venture might offer the initial profits to the shorter term, high cost of time partner, while the other waits to get greater profit over time. And then the classic differences in capability. When you are trying to, for example, identify who will take on what role in a team, you figure out who has what strengths and divvy up roles accordingly. So with a new product concept, one manager has strong quantitative skills while the other has strong marketing and design skills. That can very much determine the roles that you ultimately determine. Okay, and then lastly, is this distinguishing behaviors that make somebody truly successful? I've just created a slide that has the overarching differences. I want to say that there were 10 behaviors that distinguish people who are really skilled from average individuals. And again, if you haven't already read the article, it's very, very practical and can be very interesting and illuminating of how effective you are. So I won't go into these in great detail, and I'll ignore a few because you should have read them. But as an example, great negotiators think about more outcomes per issue than do average people. And this one I found extremely interesting, this notion of argument dilution. Particularly in business schools, we are schooled to want to be the smartest people in the room, and we believe that the more arguments that we have give a greater weight to why we are right. But what we find in negotiation studies is that the more arguments that you bring in to be right can actually, ironically, harm you. That because what happens is somebody picks on the weakest of those many arguments you have and then just specifically harps on those. So the idea is that great negotiators actually only have a few main arguments, and those are the ones that they focus on in being influential. So here were the 6 things that we should have talked about in the art and science, or you should get out of the art and science of negotiation. And my hope is that you do reflect on these, that you ask me questions when relevant there, or if you need any. I'm happy to help you think about salary negotiations going forward. And if you'd like to write this week on your negotiation, write about the 2 negotiations as your individual case study, you are welcome to do that, and you can ask me questions. My hope is that you recognize the importance of negotiation in affecting your career and ask me for any future resources. For one, or resources that you can draw upon. For one, the Getting to Yes book is considered the worldwide bestseller on negotiation, one that's very practical but can really change the way you think about negotiating. And frankly, there are a number of different articles that I can recommend should you care to continue to pursue this line. I hope you've had a good time listening to this, and I look forward to seeing you next week.